if you are a singer or a musician with the desire for a successful career, one big question you may have is, how do I build that award-winning brand that stands the test of time in your music? Well, I'm Gloria St. Germain from Ultimate Music Theory, and my very special guest today is Mike Reno, the lead singer from the famous rock band Loverboy, who's built an award-winning brand with music that does stand the test of time. And you've sold millions of records, including Turn Me Loose, of course. So welcome, Mike Reno. Yay! Hey, Mike.
Hi.
Thank you so much for joining me. Now, Mike, since 1980, like, oh my goodness, right? Loverboy's had this massive success in writing, recording. You've been on tour, selling millions of records, including Workin for the Weekend from the album Get Lucky, of course, Lovin' Every Minute of It. Who doesn't love that one? Heaven in Your Eyes, Chasing Angels, Almost Paradise, and of course, there's so many more. And before we get into the story of the red leather pants, which is why I'm wearing my red leather jacket today.
I see that.
It's going to be fun. Can you share with us, let's just sort of take it back a bit, and how did you get started with your singing and with your bands?
Well, Gloria, I started out on the drums. I was in Victoria at the time, Victoria, British Columbia.
Yeah.
And the Beatles had come out, and I wanted to be the drummer for the Beatles, basically, you know. So
Right.
I applied for the job. I didn't get an answer back from the Beatles, but I kept drumming and singing and drumming and singing. And then people said, listen, there's all these bands coming out like Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin. They all have lead singers. Why don't you drop the drums and just stand up front? And I was terrified, of course, because I didn't have my security blanket. And so but I gave it a try. And I noticed that the audience was really, you know, paying attention. You could talk to them more. Instead of hiding behind the drums, I'm standing right up front. And that was a real challenge for me, but I did it. And then pretty soon I kind of got used to it. And then I realized you can talk to the audience, communicate, and it's better for the audience and better for the band.
Right. Yeah. And I understand that you, I guess it was in the early 70s, you joined a cover band called Morning Glory. A very cool name. And that's where you were playing the drums, right?
Yeah. I was playing drums and singing all the early Led Zeppelin stuff, Deep Purple and all that. And it was very interesting. And it was in a town called Penticton in the Okanagan Valley in British Columbia. And we pretty much had that whole Okanagan Valley wrapped up. Everybody wanted to see us. And it was really a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's amazing. And what sort of brought you from the backstage, from the drummer point to the front as the lead singer? Was it just something that you thought, hey, it's going to be more fun up here? Or what was sort of the motivation for that?
I think it was because all the bands were starting to have lead singers, like instead of drummer singers. You know, they were having lead singers run around a little bit and, you know, entertain the crowd and talk to them and tell a few stories. Up front was kind of where it was happening. And so it grew from groups like Rare Earth, who had a drummer singer, and the Eagles, who had a drummer singer. It kind of grew into like the Led Zeppelins and the, you know, I got to say Deep Purple, they had a lead singer. So the whole thing kind of grew out of necessity for having a lead singer. So they said, can you give it a try? And I did. I sold my drums to the drummer who was going to take my place. much I shouldn't have done it, because now those drums are probably worth a fortune. The first Ludwig drums that came out back in the late 60s.
Yeah. And you played a little bit of guitar too, right? You're self-taught on guitar?
Oh yeah, I play guitar and bass. I wrote "Turn Me Loose" on the bass, for crying out loud. And I dink around on guitars all the time. Yeah. Mostly to write songs.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of writing songs, you were introduced to Paul Dean, right, in 1979 at a nightclub called The Refinery. Yeah. And so tell us the story, like, how did that lead into forming Loverboy?
Well, I left a nightclub one night and I could hear some guitar playing in the background as I'm walking out to my car. The Refinery was in Calgary. What I found was, in this old bus station that they used to fix Greyhound buses in, it was empty except for one person sitting on a chair with a small recorder on the ground, and he was stomping his foot and playing these grooves. Yeah. And I walked in on him and I peeked around the corner, and it was like, he said, come on in. And that night we wrote 2 songs together, and I was planning on going to California to visit my brother, but I never ended up leaving Calgary. And Paul and I have been together ever since.
Wow, that's amazing. And I mean, when you released your first Loverboy album in 1980, and then the band went on tour extensively, did you ever imagine that you'd be releasing like multi-platinum albums? And was that something that you thought, oh, this is going to happen, or did it just evolve?
Glory, all we were planning on doing was we were singing for a box of beer and hopefully meet some girls, and that turned into a multi-million-dollar business. And you know what? A lot of it is because we had something that people wanted to hear. Our music at the beginning was completely different than a lot of things that people have heard, and I think that was part of the reason why we broke through.
Yeah.
And other than the fact that we had good people working for us, Paul and I took almost 2 years to find the right band members. And we went from show to show to show looking for members that we thought would fit into our original concept. And we also had a few concepts, like we had original songs that we wanted to dress a little different and make sure we so we had yellow and red and, colors that really stood out. Right. So we had a few ideas off the bat, and we kind of stuck with it right from the beginning.
Yeah. And I think that really has, attributed to your success, is that you really were thinking not just about, oh, let's just do this song, but it's the whole brand, as we've been talking a little bit about today. And also in addition to being an amazing singer, you were also an award-winning songwriter. And so what was that process like for you? Like when you start writing, do you start with the words, sort of, handwritten notes? Like what is the creation process for you, Mike?
Well, generally I start with the music. And a lot of times I'll have a list of song titles.
Okay.
But it's different. Sometimes it goes one way and sometimes it goes the other way. But for most of the early stuff in Loverboy, Paul and I would come up with these grooves, and then we'd fill in the blanks afterwards. But the music would start first. Yeah. Or there'd be like a key phrase. Like I started Turn Me Loose on the bass. And I played it every chance I could get, to the point where Paul Dean said to me, if you play that one more time, I'm going to hit you with my guitar. And I said, well, why don't you play some guitar around it? And he says, okay. So he started playing guitar around my bass line. Yeah. Then I jumped over onto the drums, because it was just the beginning. It was just the two of us.
Right.
And so we had this little 4-track recorder that was kind of state of the art at the time. We'd laugh about it now, but it ran with tape and everything. We'd record little parts and then add parts and then try some different vocal things. So, it's always different, but for Paul and I, mostly it was groove and chords. We came up with the basic outline for it, and then we'd fill in the blanks.
Yeah. And I think it's such an emotional process. Like you sort of start with a few thoughts, and then it just kind of goes from there. And of course you can tell by the audience reactions when you go out and play your live shows that they're loving every minute of it. Of course, that's your line, but it's just so true. And I think Loverboy's music is heard everywhere. I mean, you're doing live shows, you've got albums, movies, commercials. I mean, it's even inside those musical greeting cards. I remember I was shopping and I opened a card one day. I was at the drugstore, and I thought, oh, I should just get, this little birthday gift card. And I just opened it and it started playing, Working for the Weekend. And I'm like, Mike, you're inside the greeting card. It was hilarious. And I think, for the listeners out there, and we've got some of our viewers, they're saying, hey, Mike, hi, how's it going? Yes, thanks for joining us. We're talking about building your brand, and it's not just about writing that hit song. And for you, obviously, it was different, because we're talking about the 80s, where we couldn't just hop online and, put a video together. But in connecting with other musicians, what do you see as maybe that one thing that's missing from bands today in helping them build their brand?
Well, I think building a brand is, you got to consider things. A lot of things that we just kind of did out of necessity. I'll give you an example, Glory. In the early days, when we played nightclubs just to get started and try out the songs on the people, the lights were so close that I ended up cutting the sleeves off my T-shirt and putting it over my head to soak up the sweat as like a mock headband. Yeah. And then I started wearing bandanas just to keep the sweat out of my eyes for performing. And it turned out that everybody thought that was pretty cool, so I kept doing it. But a few years ago, I thought, I'm not going to do that anymore. And I went on stage, and everybody in the crowd went, where's your headband? So I realized that actually I'd started something. And, and it's the red leather pants. Of course, you get that question all the time. The red leather pants was almost an accident too, because our management had a employee that her husband owned Netto Leather in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. And she said to us, go down to the leather shop and my husband will let you guys have anything you want. And we'll just, you know, you can pay us when you start making some money. Yeah. We thought that was the best offer we've heard in a long time. So I went down and grabbed a few pairs, and the pair that fit the best were the red leather. So I started wearing those. Yeah. Paul got a pair too, so he started wearing on days when I wasn't wearing them. Everybody was wearing different stuff, but it was all leather, and it was great. Right. But then we realized leather is really not a very comfortable thing to wear on stage after the first 20 minutes because, you know, it gets wet and it doesn't stretch, and it's kind of like, you know. Right. But when the time came for our second record, the artist said, well, what do these guys wear on stage? And so he looked at some pictures and he saw that we had red leather pants and stuff. So the whole concept for Get Lucky became, you know, the red leather pants. And if you look on the other side of it, the backside, you can see us running through the Forum in Montreal, by the way, before they tore it down. Yeah. And I got a headband on and we got the leather pants, and it's just the color scheme was there. And yeah, it just kind of blossomed from there. But the trick is to recognize what is one of your trademarks and stick with it, just like Coca-Cola. Yeah. Or any of the big trademarks. It's like now become a real big thing. Yeah. And I think you need to really maintain that brand throughout your career. And of course, you can deviate and add a few things. But I think probably another thing that has really led to the massive success you've had. I mean, you've traveled extensively with Loverboy. Can you tell us about your bandmates? And I guess, how have you maintained the relationships? Because that's really key in any group longevity is how do you maintain those relationships? Yeah, good question. What happens is with this band is the musicianship is very high. I feel very lucky and honored to be able to work with such great musicians. A lot of people are telling us lately that our music is and the shows are sounding better than they used to, even in the old days. And I guess it's just because we've been playing a lot of these songs for a long time. Mm-hmm. But I think the musicianship, everybody's really dedicated. We respect these songs. We try to play them just like the record. We get a compliment for playing all the hits instead of trying to, you know, throw out a whole bunch of new songs that nobody's ever heard before. A lot of bands do that, and the people get disappointed. Yeah. We kind of realized that, so we didn't want to disappoint our crowd. And we're getting pretty darn good at it after all these years. For sure. Absolutely. And I think too, I want to, I mean, I know it's old news now, but I must say congratulations, because Loverboy, of course, inducted into the Canadian Music Hall of Fame, and you continue to tour and play live shows and, you know, do your hits, as you said, Turn Me Loose, which you wrote with, I guess, guitarist Paul Dean, won Composer of the Year, Juno Award together. That must have been a really cool moment for you. It was quite a surprise. It was a kind of a funny night because it was the first time we kind of went into an award ceremony. Yeah. And we all got in there, we sat down, and right off the bat, we started winning these awards. And I remember Burton Cummings was the host for the Junos that year. Yeah. And after about 3 awards, Burton says, we'll be right back with the Loverboy Awards right after these words from our sponsors. Yeah. And we won 7 that year. 7, Glory. That's crazy. Yeah, even our producers and engineers won. Yeah. And it was just one of those times. It's just almost like, actually, nobody's never come close to beating that. I think one year Nickelback won 5, deservedly so, but we won 7. That's amazing. Crazy. That is crazy. Well, it just goes to show you that you've worked really, really hard at not only building the relationship among your band members, but as you said, you hunted down like who's going to really stand the test of time. And you guys have all been together for such a long time. And I think when we think about bands, and obviously, you know, our family is all in the music business. And when I think about bands wanting to build a brand and see the massive success that you've had, maybe you can share with us a little about the story behind Turn Me Loose, because Turn Me Loose has over 14 million YouTube views just on that one channel alone that I was checking out. So tell us about that. And of course, the famous scream in Turn Me Loose. Well, there's a couple of stories. I'll tell the first one I'll tell you is the song was recorded and put away. They took the reel off and put it away. And I dropped by the studio one night. I don't really know why, but I just drove in. Paul was doing some guitar overdubs and some solos on different songs. And I asked if Bob Rock and Bruce Fairbairn would take the reel off and put on Turn Me Loose again. And they went, Mike, that's a 2-hour thing. You know, we got to align the board, take the tape off, remix the whole thing. And you sure you really want to do this? And I kind of begged them to do it. And they did. And I sang the song completely different. I threw in some different lyrics. And then I threw in that scream. And it was just like, you know, I got to do it my way. And I just went crazy. And then I walked outside. I was kind of sweaty from singing. And I looked up and it was a full moon. And I think a lot of that had to do with the full moon, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. Well, sometimes it's all meant to be. And obviously, even though it was a bit of work, and, you know, we talked a little bit about, you know, how things were when you were recording back then. I mean, it was like, you know, 4-track, 8-track, big boards compared to now where you can literally record an album on your computer. It was a lot of work. And obviously it's a good thing he said, sure, Mike, I can do that, because it's a classic, right? It's just a classic. People love it. And as a matter of fact, I was sharing with you before we went live how much fun I had doing you know, a little bit of research and watching your YouTube performances. And I really admire how Loverboy has continued to perform together. I mean, it's been almost 40 years. I mean, you still look like you're only, you know, 39. So I don't know how you've been playing for 40 years, but when we actually talk about the music business, though, Loverboy has not only been taking care of business, giving fans what they want, and hearing their favorites at live events, which I think is key. And as you said, you continue to do that, but you've also continued to reinvent your music through different arrangements of songs. Can you tell us a little bit about, you came up with the new sort of big jam in the middle of Hot Girls in Love. Can you share a little bit about that?
Well, we wanted to feature some of the guys in the band, and you know, just on like a solo, so that they could really kind of move out of the structure of the song. And what we do when we plan the set is we come on strong for 3 or 4 songs, and then we take it down a little bit, then we bring it back up, then we take it down, then we kind of go straight on and boom, boom. So when the Hot Girls in Love song comes on, the people really love that song. That was actually one of the highest charting songs that we had in our career, believe it or not. I was quite surprised to find that out recently. So what we did is we cut the bass player loose, which is our wonderful bass player, Ken Seneve, Spider, as we call him.
Yes.
And then we cut him loose with our drummer, Matt Fournette. And these two are very impressive together. And what it does is it gives the audience a chance to see these guys kind of jam and go crazy. And, you know, it's really something to see. And every night the crowd just goes crazy for it. And as soon as that comes to kind of a big ending, we break right into like the biggest song everybody knows, which is Turn Me Loose. Yeah. And it just seems to work. And we just keep it up because people just love it. And after the show, people are like, oh my God, that was so great. Yeah. Yeah. And that's nice. It's nice to hear reports like that.
Absolutely. I remember when you were playing here in Winnipeg, and of course, just blew me away, your performance at the casino, and just how you are more than, you know, there's a singer with the band, but in fact, when you featured everybody like that, it just blew you away. I remember him playing, you know, the Spider, you know, doing the bass, and of course going crazy on the drums. I remember he was standing, I think, on a kit back there. I don't even know how he could play like that, but it's showmanship, right? It's not.
Absolutely.
I think that maybe is one of the differentiations between why Loverboy has been around for so long, is because you're all showmen, and that's the key. And really, you know, longevity is like, put on a show. Don't just sing a song. You can listen to a radio when you're, you know, an album at home, but it's the showmanship that is so impressive with you guys.
And I try to tell a story or two. Like some nights I get really talkative and the band starts laughing. And some nights I just not as much. But what I do is I tell stories that the people never heard before, and they really get a kick out of it. And I think they realize that there's a personality and like a whole family spirit behind us touring for all these years. Yeah. I got to tell you, I tell people that we do the shows for free. We get paid for the traveling, you know.
Yeah. Well, and it's true, because travel is exhausting. I mean, so many different time zones and, you know, different venues and coordinating everything. And I think a lot of groups, they start out with a vision to create music. They want to tour the world. They want to write their own songs. And then when things fizzle out, you know, they're really not maybe expecting it. But what is maybe the one secret that has kept the Loverboy band together for so many years successfully?
Well, we respect these songs. We've realized that these songs have developed a life of their own.
Yeah.
And they've become bigger than any one of us. So as a group, we can present these songs and people just love it. And here's something that happened a few years back. The casino started getting serious about throwing concerts because they realized they could bring a whole bunch of people and stay at their hotel. Right. They could, go to their restaurants and they could even gamble. They could do whatever they wanted to. So it was a kind of a super fun spot to do. When we first started, there were no casino shows at all. And then midway through our touring, the casino shows became, and nowadays they're beautiful 2,800 seaters, a lot of them. We're playing Rama, which is called Casino Rama in Northern Ontario, and it holds 5,600 people. And we packed that place, and it's just a ball.
Yeah.
And the casino's huge, and they got all these great restaurants. And so what happens is all of Ontario goes to these shows. And it's right. I think a lot of it is the success lately. A lot of these bands that we travel with all the time, like ZZ Top, Cheap Trick, REO Speedwagon, Styx, Huey Lewis and the News, the Tubes, all these groups we play with. We're all playing these casinos, and along with comics and everything. I mean, Jay Leno's playing out there. It's just Seinfeld's playing. This is kind of a place where we're landing up, and we're all happy for it because they have beautiful showrooms with beautiful dressing rooms, and you could do a few shows when you don't have to travel as much. But a lot of it happened because these casinos got serious about having the entertainment. So we're really happy for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And how cool does it feel when you see, thousands of your fans singing the words to all your songs live?
Wow, that's the biggest compliment, and it gives us a big rush. It really does. It means like a lot of you could actually stop singing and they'll continue singing the song. It's wonderful,
right? Yeah.
I'm one of the few that I don't use the television prompter thing. I don't use one yet, but I don't have to because the crowd I just lip read, and if I forget a lyric, I know they won't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember when you did the show in Winnipeg, and I remember you came off stage and you said, how cool was that? Obviously there's a lot of fans that grew up, listening to your music in the 80s, but then there was a lot of young people that knew all the words to every song and they're singing along. So it's like a whole new, influx of fans that are now becoming super fans, learning those words and listening to your music all over again.
I ask a lot of them, how did you hear about us? And they go, are you kidding? Our parents have all the records and we just start putting them on, and you guys, are one of the greatest bands around for that. Yeah. And I noticed the young kids that, in their early 20s and stuff. Yeah. They got the headbands on, they got the red pants, and they got the rock and roll t-shirts, and they sing all the words. To me, that's a huge compliment in that
absolutely
they found it on their own. And also the internet's kind of opened it all up. This band started before the internet, and it started before cell phones. So, talk about change.
Yeah, talk about change. But when you think about it, it is a huge compliment to have those young, but it just goes to show you how cool the music is. It's memorable. And I think that's the key is, I've heard people write songs and go, listen to my song. And I'm like, it's good, but is it memorable? Right? Am I going to want to listen to this again and again? And speaking of knowing all the words to your songs, one of my favorites is when you sing the duet Almost Paradise with your beautiful wife, Catherine St. Germain. And yes, she happens to be the daughter of the legendary entertainer, Ray St. Germain, who just happens to be my husband. It's funny. I remember we were visiting Kathy in Vancouver, and she said, oh, I'm going to play you this. I think it was an 8-track or cassette tape or something. And she said, I'm singing Almost Paradise with Mike Reno. And I'm like, oh my God. And here she's pulling out this VHS machine. And I mean, you've sang with Kathy for a lot of years and continue to do so, obviously. So how did you connect with Kathy in the first place?
Well, when we were both in Vancouver, living in, separate worlds, we would get called to come down and do a lot of the, the charity work, maybe at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre or or a telethon. So they'd call Kathy to be the girl singer and they'd call me to be the guy singer. So we'd volunteer our time, And we ended up, hooking up over the years, just doing those shows and talking. So we became friends many years ago. And we kind of turned that around about 15 years ago and became a couple, which is kind of neat because when she comes with us with Loverboy, we can sing it live because Loverboy doesn't generally sing that song because it's a duet with a man and a woman, and unless Kathy comes with us. So, and she sings it so beautifully, I can't help it, and the crowd loves it. It's one of those songs. I think that album, that soundtrack for Footloose, sold almost 30 million copies. It's like crazy.
Yeah, right. When you think about that, I mean, did you ever think? I mean, the success of Loverboy started in 1980, and now you're coming like 40 years later, 2020. I mean, you really got to be celebrating something. That's 40 years. What are you planning for the big 40?
Well, we got 2 months off right now. We're kind of in the middle of a little break, which is around the Christmas time, which we like to do.
Yes.
When we come back, we're trying to put together some original ideas for the 40th, other than, standard merchandise stuff that you would put out, that says celebrating 40 years. So we're kind of in the thought process of coming up with something special. And, I'm still thinking about it, but we're definitely going to do something to surprise everybody and welcome everybody for being with us all these years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, when I was thinking about it, I was watching, your videos when Loverboy first started recording which is amazing. And I thought, wow, you have such a powerful voice. Like, how do you keep your voice in shape? You do a lot of shows and you're singing full out night after night. Like, what is it that you do to kind of think, okay, I've got to save my voice?
Well, I think half of it is just kind of a God-given gift, which I respect dearly, believe me. Not everybody can sing as many shows as I do, thankfully. But what I've been doing lately, and I never used to do this, I never used to warm up that much, but nowadays I realize it's probably a good thing to spend 45 minutes warming up my voice and doing scales and just some nice voice exercises with your muscles and your neck and your diaphragm. And so I've been starting to do that, and I took a few things off the internet. It's small, it's like a 7-minute vocal, and I'll maybe go through it 3 times. Yeah. And the trick with me is I don't really hit the stage until I'm kind of sweating a little bit. I got to be nice and warm. Yeah. And once I strap that headband on and walk out on stage, there's no stopping me. And I don't talk much during the day generally when I'm touring. I stay pretty quiet. And I don't do sound checks anymore because I don't like to get the engine going twice a day. I like to get it going once a day. Yep. And then I'm kind of quiet and I work out a little bit on the voice. I calm it down after the show. Yeah. And, I lead a pretty clean life. Yeah. Kind of boring for a rock star, but.
Well, I think that's important, I mean, and I'm assuming you're still, doing some writing and thinking of new material, because I think the creative process, you don't really shut it down. It's just a part of who you are. And when you're writing, like, well, speaking of songs you've written, do you have like a favorite that like, that's my favorite song, or do you love them all?
Well, my favorite song to sing every night is When It's Over. And it's not really a lot of people's choices, but it's kind of one of those songs that means a lot to me. It was a personal relationship situation for years ago. And it just means a lot to me to sing it. But recently I went to Chicago and wrote and sang a song with Jim Petterick, who wrote Eye of the Tiger. And he wrote a lot of 38 Special songs. And he was the guitar player, keyboard player for Survivor.
Oh, yeah.
And we wanted to write a song for the new Top Gun movie, Top Gun 2.
Nice.
And we submitted it. Now, we don't know if it's going to make the record, because for all I know, it could be the new soundtrack could be all Beyonce for all I know. Yeah. But it's kind of when you hear this song that we wrote, it's kind of like you can almost hear and see the jets flying by. So what we try our best to write and submit songs to a lot of different projects. And you never know which one's going to take. So you just keep trying, and you could get lucky, and we could get another big motion picture hit if we're lucky.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you've sold millions of records and your fans love you. So you really have to be super proud of your accomplishments and your awards. And was there any one thing maybe in that stood out for you where you said, You know what? I feel like I've made it. Loverboy has made it. Was there that one moment when you finally realized, oh my gosh, we're superstars?
Well, here's one thing. We were down in Mexico after recording an album. I think it was either first or second album. Some of the guys in the band, we all brought our girlfriends and went down to Mexico to do the old lay in the sun and have a beer. So all of a sudden, we got a call from our management and said, you have to go back to Los Angeles. This Saturday, you're going to be on the Dick Clark Show, American Bandstand. And as soon as I heard that, I went, I'm on American Bandstand. Yeah. That's when I realized that things had changed, and we had really kind of, made a little groove into the reality of being in the rock and roll business for real on television. American Bandstand. Actually, matter of fact, Loverboy was. I thought this would have happened a million times, but after we'd made a few gold records, we were invited back to American Bandstand with Dick Clark. And he was really starting to like us back then. And then he had us on, and we surprised him by giving him a gold record with his name on it. And he went, you know what? I've been in this business my whole life, and nobody's ever given me a gold record. He was really blown away. And I thought, that's kind of special. And since then, he invited us to play or to give awards away, to different awards on the American Music Awards. We gave Michael Jackson an award for album or something of the year, and he came up on stage and shook her hands and took the album, and it was really, he took the award, and it was really cool. So I think the American Bandstand was really the game changer for me.
Yeah. You just knew, wow. And you're right. You just kind of, that shifts gears and probably mindset too, like possibilities, not afraid to maybe knock on a few doors to say, and as you just said now, submitting an album for another movie, it's just something that, the possibility is there.
You got to try. You got to be strong, and you got to feel good about what you do, and you really got to try, and you got to keep going and never give up. Yeah. One of the best little pieces of advice I can give is find a group of people, or at least a partner, who you can really write with, and you can really feel together on, and you feel the same about a lot of things. Finding good people to work with and keeping with them has been one of the keys to our success, for sure. And you really got to stick with the people that work.
Absolutely. Well, your music has inspired and encouraged and entertained millions of fans. And I just want to say congratulations on all your success. And thank you so much for sharing your personal stories with us. And we look forward to seeing you live. And of course, we can always go check out all the videos on YouTube. And we know you got lots of things coming up for 2020. So now turn me loose, because I'm working for the weekend and it's almost paradise. Ha ha ha. So
I'm loving every minute of it, Glory. Loving every minute of it.
So to learn more about Mike Reno and Loverboy's upcoming shows, you can visit loverboyband.com. Thanks again, Mike, for joining me. It really means a lot to share with the world and our viewers that inspiration and your story. I'm sure it's inspired a lot of musicians today to say, oh, you know what? I am going to go look for some players that can stand the test of time and build my brand and just be who I am, right? And have fun.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you, Glory. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, for sure. If you've enjoyed this video, please be sure to like, comment, share, and join our Ultimate Music Theory Facebook group so you can network with other musicians such as Mike Reno and educators, of course. And if you want all the latest music interviews and music theory tips, just subscribe to our Ultimate Music Theory YouTube channel, where you can also watch this video. And we release new videos every week. Thanks again, Mike.
Thanks.
See you next time. Bye now.